Good morning, everyone. My name is Allie Hyngstrom, and I'm from Marquette University. First, I want to say thank you to OT for this opportunity and for organizing such a wonderful event. Get my slides going here. All right, so clinically, I'm trained as a physical therapist, and so my goal is to help people move better. I have a PhD in neuroscience, and as a rehabilitation scientist, I would like to develop new techniques that help optimize movement and make people's lives better as they are moving better. Today, I'll be sharing some data about sharing some data with chronic stroke subjects and looking at the effects of an intervention called ischemic conditioning and how it enhances pedic muscle activation as well as their strength. So I'm from Marquette University. We're located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, just in case anybody was wondering where Milwaukee, Wisconsin is. And Marquette University is a mid-sized university. And Milwaukee's located on Lake Michigan, which is a large, large body of water. And I just wanted to make the point that even though we're in the middle of the United States, we're not necessarily landlocked. So after stroke, people are weak on one side of their body. And due to the pathology of the stroke, the nervous system is unable to fully activate the pedic muscle, and that causes their weakness. In the laboratory, we can measure the ability of the nervous system to activate the muscle through a technique called voluntary activation. That's the figure on the right. We ask individuals to make a maximal contraction, in this case with the knee extensors, and as they're contracting their muscle as hard as they can, we zap them with a supramaximal electrical stimulation, and which you can see in the peak in the figure there, and we can see how much reserve is left in the muscle. So here you can see it's about 15 Newton meters, and as a physical therapist, that gets me really excited because if we can improve or optimize the activation of the pedic muscle, that 15 Newton meters can go a long way in terms of improving their ability to walk. So in addition to the inability of the nervous system to fully activate the muscle, a few years ago I began to consider other potential mechanisms of force-generating impairment, and I started to think about the muscle itself and factors that could interfere with the contractile properties. And I began collaborating with a cardiologist, Dr. David Gutterman, and he asked the question, well, how is blood flow to the muscle when it's exercising? And although there was a paper on changes in resting blood flow in people with stroke, no one had actually looked at the hyperemic response to exercise or the blood flow response to the exercising muscle in stroke. And so we quantified that, and it turns out even when you control for the lean muscle mass, individuals with stroke have a blunted blood flow response to the muscle. So then I began thinking, okay, we have an impaired neural drive, and we also have decreased blood flow to the exercising muscle. That's not good. Can we think of an intervention that might address both of those impairments following stroke? Wouldn't that be great? That would really help optimize muscle activation. And so in discussions with the cardiologist, he brought up a technique that's been used in the cardiovascular world for a long time. It's called ischemic conditioning. And he brought it up from the viewpoint of improving blood flow to the exercising muscle. So what is ischemic conditioning? Some of you may have heard of a variant of this, exercising during reduced blood flow conditions. But with ischemic conditioning, you are causing a transient or acute bout of ischemia, typically 5 minutes at a time. And it's just performed with a simple blood pressure cuff. And during the occlusion, what's happening after repeated 5-minute bouts, 5 minutes of occlusion, 5 minutes of rest, we believe that periods of ischemia are activating group 3 and group 4 afferents, and that's engaging brainstem centers, the autonomic nervous system, causing the release of neuromodulators such as serotonin and norepinephrine, and that may be boosting or priming the nervous system. Now, upon release of the blood pressure cuff, The endothelial cells respond. The endothelial cells are the cells that line the arteries by releasing a lot of substances that not only improve vasodilation, but can also excite the nervous system and induce, in some cases, neuroplasticity. So nitric oxide is released, as well as vascular endothelial growth factor and brain-derived neurotropic factor. And so, like I mentioned, ischemic conditioning has been around for about 30 years, and it's been used in all different sorts of patient populations, mainly looking at how it affects blood flow and prevents ischemia in the coronary arteries. But most recently, in the last 5 years or so, people have been looking at it as a mechanism to improve motor performance. And in healthy individuals, it's been shown to cause temporary increases in strength, as well as reduce muscle fatigue. But so far, no one has used this intervention in neurologic patient populations. And it seemed like an attractive intervention for me because it's non-invasive, and potentially people who are weak or paretic might see big gains because it might improve temporarily their strength. The idea being, if we can combine this with other strength therapies, that might translate into permanent strength gains. So the first step in investigating the efficacy of this treatment was just to see if after a single session, it could have some effect on patients' strength. And for me, as a neurophysiologist, I was interested to see how it might affect the way the nervous system is activating the muscle. What's happening, what's going on. So the purpose was to quantify the effects of a single session of ischemic conditioning on volitional muscle activation and knee extensor strength post-stroke. And if it was increasing the gain of the nervous system by causing the release of different neuromodulators, then we expected to see an increase in the magnitude of muscle EMG, as well as decreases in force recruitment thresholds and increases in maximal voluntary contraction strength. So this was our experimental protocol. This was done in 10 individuals with chronic stroke, greater than a year post their stroke. It was a very simple protocol. We did several baseline MVCs. Then we did a submaximal contraction. These are isometric contractions. And then we performed the ischemic conditioning protocol, which is 5 minutes of inflation and 5 minutes of rest, and the cuff is inflated to 225 millimeters of mercury. And at that level of pressure, that causes the arteries to collapse and causes the occlusion to the whole leg. And we're measuring strength. During the MVCs, we're also using the arrays to make measurements of muscle activation in the vastus lateralis. On the bottom right is showing the changes in strength, their MVC strength, pre and post one session of the ischemic conditioning. We also had everyone also did a sham where we did not inflate the cuff fully. And this is a representative example. There's about 15 to 18% increase in their MVC strength with the protocol. So overall, on the left, you can see the percent change in MVC for each of the individuals for this ischemic conditioning condition, and as well as the sham. So everybody did the sham, and everybody did the ischemic conditioning. And there was a significant increase in the MVC strength for the ischemic conditioning, and no change in the MVCs during the sham condition. Then, that's okay. So now looking at the magnitude of the EMG, there was not surprisingly, with an increase in strength, there was also a significant increase in the magnitude of EMG. And then we also looked at who were the responders, who had the biggest increase in strength. And not surprisingly, the people who were weaker to begin with also had larger gains in strength in response to the ischemic conditioning. Okay. So all of that is great, and we could have gotten the information about the magnitude of the EMG from bipolar recordings. So now on the next few slides, I'll talk about what information we gained from the array. So on the left, is a representative example of the change in the magnitude of the EMG, and the oranges and the red reflect an increase in the EMG. And we wanted to understand how the ischemic conditioning was affecting the activation across the whole muscle. And we made a calculation of modified entropy, which is a measure of uniformity. And overall, there was an increase in the modified entropy, which reflects an increase in uniformity following the ischemic conditioning. And then we also calculated the coefficient of variation of the RMS of the EMG. And the RMS and the coefficient of variation decreased in response to the ischemic conditioning. So overall, across the muscle, the ischemic conditioning seems to have an homogeneity or the uniformity of the paretic muscle activation. For the submaximal contractions, we performed the decomposition and extracted motor. There's just the raster plots and the torque traces. And overall, there was a decrease in the force recruitment threshold following the ischemic conditioning. There was no changes in the discharge rates, but on average, there was a decrease in the force recruitment threshold, reflecting that the units were being recruited sooner at an earlier. They were contributing to the torque at a lower force level. So just in summary, the ischemic conditioning-related gains in strength were accompanied by an increase in the magnitude of the EMG, an increase in the homogeneity of the spatial distribution of the EMG, and enhanced recruitment of the paretic motor units. Clinically, my hope is that I can use ischemic conditioning in conjunction with other traditional therapies, such as body weight support treadmill training or strength training, in order to optimize function. And the EMG arrays are very, very important methodological tools to quantify the effects of a given intervention. And I think that's been a message that's been echoed here today by other people. And as a physical therapist, I just want to make the point, as these days when medical dollars are getting tighter and tighter, we have to look for ways to quantify and show that we're making improvement in patients. And I believe the arrays is an important way that potentially we could use that to help quantify patient improvement. These are my collaborators.
Okay, it's the last presentation of the morning.